Warriors putting the ball on a play. He gets it out deep, and Havlicek steals it over the fence wall. Havlicek stole the ball. It's all over. It's all over.
Larry, fake, fall away. Hits it at the buzzer. All right. Here's Michael at the foul line. A shot on Elo. Good. The Bulls win. They win it.
Holding Court with Dee4Three.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 7 of Holding Court with Dee4Three. I'm here once again with my good friend, basketball fanatic, a big basketball fan since the 90s, a Lakers fan as well, SwaggyPLino. Thanks for joining the show again.
Thanks for having me, man. We got a lot to talk about. I'm looking forward to this show. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I'm super excited. We're going to be talking about, has the game regressed? The game of basketball. I talked about this on the Format podcast with Bruce Hope. And we also had AAU basketball coach Andy Noel on that show as well. So I definitely recommend tuning into that. And Bruce is a great guy. So check out the Format podcast. We're also going to be talking about Hakeem Olajuwon or Tim Duncan. There's a lot of debate about this. Obviously, Tim Duncan has him beat in number of rings, but we're going to factor in context here and what former players say about Hakeem and Tim Duncan, players like Mario Elie and Robert Horry, who played with both. We're going to get into the mailbag following that and the worst Twitter takes of the week, including one where it's asked if you take Rondo or Prime Stockton. So, which just drove me absolutely nuts. So, yeah, we'll jump on that when it comes time. So, first thing I want to talk about as far as the game has regressed is I want to touch on the AAU basketball situation. I call this the AAU NBA. Sometimes I'll call it the AAU WWE NBA as well. I want to read a quote from Kobe Bryant that, and this is, I believe, from 2019. This is via ESPN, and you got to remember that Kobe Bryant did play AAU before coming to the NBA.
Yes,
ESPN asked him about, and I want to know how you feel about this quote. They asked him about the AAU system, and he said, "Horrible, terrible AAU basketball. It's stupid. It doesn't teach our kids how to play the game at all. So you wind up having players that are big and they bring it up and they do all this fancy crap and they don't know how to post. They don't know the fundamentals of the game. It's stupid. When you have limitations and you understand your limitations and you stay within yourself, you can be great," Kobe Bryant said. "You know what you can do and what you can't do. In America, it's a big problem for us because we're not teaching players how to play all-around basketball. That's why you have Pa and Marc Gasol, and that's the reason why 90% of the Spurs roster is European players, because they have more skill. Teach players the game at an early age and stop treating them like cash cows for everyone to profit off of. That's how you do that. You have to teach them the game. Give them instruction. That's a deep well, because then you start cutting into people's pockets," Bryant said, about a solution. People get really upset when you start cutting into their pockets because all they do is try to profit off of these poor kids. There's no quick answer. That quote from Kobe Bryant, who knows the AAU system all too well, speaks volumes.
Right. Well, there's multiple allegories there that we could touch on in consideration of Kobe Bryant's statement of the AAU league. And for the most part, I have to agree with what he is saying. But at its core, at its root, what he's actually saying is you cannot, produce a product and expect it to be of great quality if you're not willing to invest into items that will make something, let's say, sustainable in its long term and make it have true value. And he did not find value in the AAU league. He actually called it a waste of time, which is which is daunting considering how elite a player Kobe Bryant was during his time.
And skilled.
And
not just elite. He had that footwork. He had
Yes,
the
he did.
skill, right?
But the comparison there is, once again, talking about AAU basketball versus how, players are prepared overseas. And you see that the quality is much greater overseas because it is based upon developing fundamental skills, developing the IQ of understanding what it means to be a teammate, developing self-skill to understand how you can contribute to the team, and perfecting those skills and expanding into other areas once you become very efficient at establishing a true identity as who you are as a player. In AAU, it's all about the let's say the flair.
It's turning out robots. It turns out like a one-dimensional play style, which is what he's alluding to when he's talking about bigs bringing up the ball and doing all of this fancy crap, but not having the basketball basics down.
Yeah. So he's basically saying this is an extension of playground basketball, just a place where it's just a pure exhibition, kind of like an all-star game in the NBA versus the playoffs. You know what I mean? It lacks that level of intensity, and it lacks that level of, let's say, of engaging in serious competition. It's more self-indulging. I'm out here not to contribute as a teammate, but to show what I can do as an individual. Whereas overseas, playing in the EuroLeague is about what we can do. How we can be better as a team. I'm really taking this team seriously. I want to win a championship, and the product that comes from both is astounding, legitimately. So man, we could talk about this all day.
And you talk about players like Luka Doncic coming over and 3 months after averaging about 12 points per game overseas, averaging 20 points per game in the NBA, and even coming out and saying that it's easier to score in the NBA. Ricky Rubio echoed those same sentiments, talking about the bigger court and about the pacing and the spacing and stuff, and how it's easier to get into the seams in the NBA than it was when he was playing elsewhere. So I think that speaks volumes. And look at the success that Luka Doncic has had already as a young player in the NBA. He's everywhere, as far as in basketball conversation. I want to bring up also Paul Gasol and Marc Gasol, who recently had quotes that were pretty telling as well. Via ball don't stop, Paul Gasol stated, it's talking about the game of basketball. It has changed a lot. For me, the big change is the game itself. There are very fast shots, very short possessions, few passes in each attack. There are many hasty shots. And when I was younger, some of the shots that are attempted today would have seen the coach send you to the bench as a punishment. I think all of us want to send James Harden to the bench at some point, but we can't. Now it is encouraged to shoot in the first 8 seconds of a possession. It has lost the beauty of the game, the purity it had. The fact of moving the ball from one side to the other, the ball inside, outside, which was to play with 2 in the post. Now there are times when there are teams that play with 5 small guys. Mario Hezonja played the other day as a center with us. This is when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks. So Paul Gasol echoing kind of in a different way what Kobe Bryant, his former teammate, said about the game today. And a lot of that, as you know, and as Kobe discussed, it starts at the youth level. That's the way these players are being coached and trained coming out. And when I say kind of producing robots, what it's doing is it's a lack of discipline, poor coaching training methods over time. It's focusing players on, making players almost focus on one-dimensional style. Oh, you can have a handle and you can shoot, then you're good, right? It's churning out those players, and that's why much of the NBA game now, in my opinion, has turned so one-dimensional, because it does start at that youth level.
Absolutely. Whatever you create in youth, manifests itself into the product that will exist in the future. And one key word that you said there that's very important, that is lost, is discipline. And if anybody knows anything about art, the one thing that has to be maintained above all, even though you may break away from tradition, is the discipline, is the core there to help you accentuate upon developing true talent. Now, we all are born with talent. Some kids are naturals. Some kids will just have an innate talent for shooting the ball and getting it into the hoop, but they still need that structure. They still need the fundamental guidance of understanding what it means to, run off the ball, finding the best shot on the court, knowing when to find your spots and where to go based upon situations and circumstances. And those things can only be taught fundamentally. But as a result of you having that foundation there in fundamental understanding of the game, your game will blossom into a unique individualistic aspect that can be appreciated by all.
A creative player, a creative individual who has more than one dimension. He has multiple dimensions to his game. Exactly, 100%. And, the other point of this too, you said natural. I grew up with this guy, best friend. He's still my best friend. We played high school basketball together. This guy's diet all through high school, basically. And then after, when we started playing in leagues, this guy was my height. So he's about 6'2", but what he did was he drank 12 packs of Mountain Dew. He drank Mountain Dew every day. He wouldn't drink water. He never went and worked out his legs. This guy dunked constantly. My height. His name is Craig. He was gifted. You were talking about gifts, right? He never took care of his body. This guy had a six-pack. He was throwing it down. Me, I could get above the rim, but I couldn't dunk, right? And I took care of myself better than he did. So there is a point to natural gifts, and some players have those natural gifts. But the problem is when you come up and you're just an athlete. If you have a guy I'll use an example from the NBA. You have a guy like Kedrick Brown, who came to the Celtics, right? And he was more of a straight line, could jump really high, good dunker. He competed in the dunk contest. You have a guy like Kedrick Brown. But if a guy like that only has that ability, he's really, limiting himself, and he's not as much of an asset on the team. And unfortunately, what I see a lot in the NBA today is a lot of guys who, in a straight line, they can jump pretty high. Sure, they have a decent handle and whatnot, but they don't have that all-around game.
Correct. In order for you to have the all-around game, that has to be developed early. And once again, you have to be able to focus upon the fundamental understanding of anything before you reach a point of mastery. So you can have the full potential there. You can have the athleticism. You can even have the perfect body, as you mentioned, with little care. But it means nothing if you don't have a profound foundational understanding of whatever you're engaging in to blossom and truly grow into its full aspect of itself. And that's what we see in the game that, in my opinion, have digressed through time. Because you just don't have those principles there that are installed to help build that true skyscraper that is limitless, I'm sorry, I want to interrupt you, and then you can finish that. Yeah, they don't reach that skyscraper, right? They don't reach that ceiling. But you watch a guy like Anthony Davis. Whenever Jimmy Butler was on him, Anthony Davis struggled mightily to score. Anthony Davis is from that system. Anthony Davis is playing like a perimeter player out there, and he doesn't know how to use his size. Every time they were trying to switch and Jimmy Butler was ending up on Anthony Davis didn't know what to do. He didn't have the footwork to get around him. He didn't have the size to go around. I mean, he didn't use his size well to go around him. He wasn't using his length properly or anything like that. And every time, and this is why I laugh when people say, oh, he's so skilled and whatnot. More of the reason he puts up numbers is because of just the way the game is played today. Yeah.
Right. That is more why. And because stats are incredibly inflated as well. But yeah, continue. I wanted to bring that up because I was thinking about the matchup with Jimmy Butler and how he was just struggling mightily.
Well, Anthony Davis is an anomaly within himself because he had a huge spurt. And as a result of that, he went from like a guard type of mentality to being this big man. That's why at the University of Kentucky, all he could do was virtually block and rebound. But Anthony Davis did find himself a little bit when he entered into the NBA. He found a style that resonated with him. However, because he doesn't have a true profound foundational understanding of what it means to be a big man, because he did not grow and develop as a big man. Clearly, Anthony Davis grew and developed as a guard, and he had to adjust into being a big man. And some will say, well, this is going to get the point. No, this further solidifies the point, because if you don't have a profound understanding of who you are, you know, at a young age, understanding your role, understanding why you're doing what you're doing, or the reason as to what you're doing out there on the court, fundamentally, you have to adapt. You're going to have to grow into defining your role. So Anthony Davis had to grow into this big man who is a hybrid of a guard, but because of his size, he's able to get away with that and do so rather efficiently. But fundamentally, like you mentioned, D, you see where he does not have the root there, because anyone know, hey, if Jimmy Butler is on me, I'm passing the ball out. Let me reposition. Let me go down.
I'll say like kids say now, that should be barbecue chicken every single time. That should be an absolute dominant display of easy scoring. That's what that should be. That's
what I would do. If I was Anthony Davis, you give me the rock. I see the matchup. Okay, I'm passing it to the guard. I'm going down, post up, give it back to me. You know, I'm not going to challenge you in the perimeter as a ball handler. I'm going to use my skill as a big man to put myself in an advantageous point to where I can be efficient with wasting little to no time.
Right, but it's very rare for a guy to have a good back to the basket game now. That's the thing too. So he's not doing an aggressive back down. He's not using his footwork with his back to the basket and whatnot. I almost fell out of my chair trying to do that. But yeah, the whole point is that you don't see enough of that. And I wanted to bring up another to move a little bit further into this. So he also mentioned Marc Gasol, Kobe did. And Marc Gasol came out with a quote via Bleacher Report, said, "Stats are killing the game of basketball. A lot of things happen that you cannot measure in stats." And I brought this up on the format podcast. The media, the NBA itself, influencers, etc., they want people to focus on stats, and that's their main talking point for everything, because stats can make everybody feel like an expert. It can make everybody feel like they're involved. It gets more people talking basketball, and it's not about knowing the game. It's not about watching a full game. What they do is they want people to focus on stats and accolades and make that the deciding factor to cater to those short attention spans. And I wanted to get your idea on what Marc Gasol, like how you feel about that statement about stats. And I'll also throw out analytics in general. Stats and analytics, you know, killing the game of basketball.
Well, that's the thing. Stats seems to be the source of validation that makes things credible, you know, to in defining a player. And we all know that's just so inaccurate. You know, you don't see the quality of a player based upon the numbers. You see the quality of the player based upon how the player plays and performs out there on the court. The stats does not show how clutch a performer is, how composed they are during intense situations that require a higher level of intelligence to execute a play. You know, stats are just nothing but pure numerical values that are used to falsely illustrate how significant a player is. It does not totally define the qualitative assets that will be effective during those moments in the game when you need those so-called stat numbers to be there.
There's so many things that don't show up on the stat sheet. And the person that came up with these advanced stats too, I believe, is John Hollinger, who is a baseball guy. And what is baseball? Right. Baseball is an individual sport. Baseball is all about numbers. It's the same reason why they consider Mike Trout, they put him in the GOAT conversation, and his team can't even make the postseason. any year. And it's just because he puts up good individual numbers. So the moment the NBA starts acting like the MLB, we have a big problem. And that's one of the things. And if you look at these advanced stats too, they are formulas. They're just completely concocted formulas that are supposed to tell you a story. And the only thing they do is tell you a bunch of BS most of the time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. Statistical analysis, in my opinion, just needs to be reformatted. It is a definite reformation that needs to take its course, especially when it comes down to comparing players of the past to the present. And it does not tell the style of game. Stats does not tell effort. It does not define the intensity of how players are engaging with one another out there on the court. Stats just does not provide the whole story upon the career of an individual.
And I'll give you an example too. So they give you an example is James Harden. They try to talk about him in the media because they have to, right? They have to have their stars, their idols and whatnot. They talk about James Harden being one of the greatest scorers ever, or like top scorer in the NBA today. And they say, oh, look at his true shooting percentage. And I'll say, yes, well, what about those 10 or 15 shots that he missed that were deep, long threes that he stepped back into that back rimmed and gave easy fast break opportunities for the team? That doesn't show up on the stats. That doesn't show, that terrible shot selection doesn't say anything about how he throws out his teammates, how they didn't get into a rhythm. It doesn't say anything about how he took his own teammates out of the game. It doesn't say anything about that. There are so many things that stats don't measure, but people want to say, oh, well, he has a high true shooting percentage. Why do they want you focused on that? Because any Joe Schmo off the streets can go on Basketball Reference and look at that and say, ha, James Harden's a great offensive player. Let's talk about it. That's the purpose of it.
And the key word that you brought up there is individual. Right. As far as I can remember, basketball is a team sport. Right. And I thought teams win championships. Yeah, you'll have a leader or two who will be there to help drive them to these areas of greatness. But ultimately, you need a team. And that's the thing. Stats does not define the greatness of the team player. It's the career. It
also doesn't define the greatness of an individual player either. Because Hakeem Olajuwon never had 300 assists in a season. Right? Mm-hmm. He might be a top 5 passing big man I have ever seen. This guy got doubled on every single possession almost his entire career. He had to be because he would just kill you and cook you in the post. But what ended up happening was he would be constantly kicking it out to the right man and getting hockey assists all over the floor. Hockey assists are not a stat. Hakeem Olajuwon had under 300 assists. David Robinson in a single season had over 300 assists, and David Robinson was not close to the passer that Hakeem Olajuwon was, and that's what I'm talking about. You can't measure somebody's passing ability off of their assists, and era matters.
Right, and there it is. That's a solid argument, hands down, because when you look at that argument between David Robinson and Hakeem Olajuwon, I mean, they were both great players. But in my opinion, Hakeem Olajuwon was a big man with a guard's body.
Algis Hasner said the same thing, his former teammate. He goes, you guys don't understand. We were in practice, and Hakeem Olajuwon's out there smoking three-pointers. He easily could shoot the three. And, I want to bring up something about that whole thing. There were a lot of big guys back then that could shoot the rock and shoot from three. I want to give an example of Jack Sikma. So Jack Sikma, for his whole career up until his last 3 years, didn't take threes. He was just like, you know what? And then they were like, Jack Sikma, we would like you to take threes. And he shot like 35 or 40% or whatever. He went out there and he started shooting threes and making them. You don't think that if they asked these skilled bigs like Hakeem Olajuwon or Patrick Ewing, who had range out to the three-point line, constantly knocking down mid-range shots, you don't think that these guys would be shooting a high three-point percentage at a high volume in today's NBA? Joel Embiid and these guys today that they say, oh, the stretch 5 league, they're not shooting good percentages. Karl Anthony Towns is the exception to the rule.
He's the only one. But let's see, I hate doing this because it sounds cliche, but I have to take it there. Let's just put Hakeem Olajuwon in today's game. Like, seriously. And witness how easy it would be for this man to average 40 points a night.
Put Jimmy Butler on Hakeem Olajuwon in that situation. Please, please. He was cooking David Robinson and Patrick Ewing and Orlando Shaq. What do you think that Hakeem Olajuwon is going to do on Jimmy Butler or with PJ Tucker on him or with Nikola Jokic? What is Hakeem Olajuwon going to do to these guys?
Gosh. And like I said, Hakeem Olajuwon is one of my favorite players of all time. Like top 5. He's like probably close to number 2 and number 3 for me because of what he can do inside and out. And man, I know you want to talk about Olajuwon versus Duncan, but hey, this is a good segue. We can get right into it, but like what I loved about Hakeem Olajuwon is the set of skill that he had for every area on the court, whether it was on the perimeter or down low. He knew exactly and precisely what he was going to do at all times. It was
on the defensive end.
Yes, and on the defensive end as well. And let's think about this. How influential Hakeem Olajuwon was? Well, Michael Jordan, in his latter stages of his career with the last 3, took a 2-year hiatus, played basketball. Where do you think he got that fadeaway from?
Oh, no, he said how influential Hakeem Olajuwon was. And not only that, he said that that's the player that out of any player in NBA history is the player that he would have wanted to play with the most. You talk about team, right? You talk about the team aspect of a player, stuff that doesn't show up in the stat sheet even though Hakeem Olajuwon's stats are out of this world if you actually take a look at him. But he had 376 blocks in a single season. His highest steals are 213, 27.8 points. As a center, 1,000 plus rebounds. His stats are out of this world, but he was so much even more than his stats. But Michael Jordan talked about that. He goes, if there's one player, first off, it was probably his player he most feared. Yeah. Number 1. Number 2, that's the player he'd want to play with the most. That is incredibly telling.
Absolutely. And you could tell Michael Jordan feared Hakeem Olajuwon because he emulated his game after Olajuwon. All of a sudden, he came back and became this monstrous post player, emulating the footwork of Hakeem Olajuwon. Who else went along and improved their game doing the same thing? Kobe Bryant did the same thing.
And it's why Olajuwon too, when he said when he was working with LeBron on his post game and stuff, he goes, listen, LeBron, he basically was like, LeBron is a fine player, but in no way, shape, or form can you compare him to Michael Jordan as a basketball player. He said there is no comparison.
There
you can see that if you know hoop, if you watch those two players play. I like to use this example. Let's say you're playing a pickup game and you don't know who these guys are. Let's say they're wearing cutoffs. There's no names on the back of the jersey. There's no crowd. There's no media. And you're just watching these guys play basketball.
Mm-hmm.
There is no way in hell anybody chooses LeBron, the basketball player, compared to Michael Jordan. The only reason why this is even a discussion in the debate, the only reason why LeBron debate with quotes, the only reason why they even use it is because LeBron is a now player and they have to promote the now product. But if you talk from a straight basketball player standpoint, it is an incredible insult to Michael Jordan and to other players as well.
Exactly. Well, the reason why I would choose Michael Jordan and LeBron James is say there were no reputation. There was no reputation, like you said. We're just putting ourselves in that situation. We're just watching these two players play out there on the court with no knowledge of who they are. The reason I would choose Michael Jordan alone is because of his mindset, in which LeBron James would not compare. Like Michael Jordan would just have this will and this intensity and this aspect of accountability with himself.
No excuses.
Not only go after you offensively, but to go after you defensively and to prove I'm the best player out here on the court.
It's the same reason why he was taking Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady when he was with Washington at age 39 or 40. He was like, you know what? I don't care if you think I'm an old man. I don't care if you think I'm 39, 40, and I can't guard you. I'm going to take you, Vince Carter. I'm going to guard you, Tracy McGrady. Not only am I going to guard you, Tracy McGrady, but I'm going to outscore you as well. And I'm going to outshoot you. So.
And think about that on a playground level when you're looking at LeBron James and Michael Jordan in this scenario. Who you're going to respect? You're going to respect Michael Jordan. Like, he's not only going at the best player on the court, he's actually defending the best player on the court, and he's taking it upon himself to will his team to victory. Exactly. LeBron James, you're biting your fingernails there, and you're a little bit timid. You know, you got some skill, but I don't see you asserting yourself when it's necessary. Michael Jordan is rising to the occasion, and he's coming at you consistently.
And a lot of players back then did. That's what we don't see enough of in today's game. There's not enough competition as well. That's why I call it sometimes the WWE NBA. So I wanted to point out, too, a couple other things. Kobe White, on January 13th, 2020, an article came out. Ashish Mathur wrote the article that I'm reading from, and he said, this is what he goes, analytics are taking over the NBA to the chagrin of players. The numbers say mid-range shots aren't good shots anymore, something Chicago Bulls rookie point guard Kobe White had to learn the hard way. And this is a quote from Kobe White. He says, when I first got here, I took a couple of mid-ranges and they were like, nah, we don't want that. That's a bad shot, Kobe White said via The Athletic. So it took some getting adjusted to, because the mid-range was a tool that I had in my bag that I like to use. But if it's a bad shot, it's a bad shot. That is incredibly telling.
Yes.
And I want to point out that if you watch kids play pickup now, if you ever drive by a court, not as many people are playing, obviously, now because of everything going on. But, you know, if you drive by a court, what are kids doing? Or if you're involved in a pickup game, they're jacking threes. They're doing these stupid step backs they see, and they're taking these threes, and they'll pass up mid-range shots. They don't have the same intensity on defense. They're not posting up. If you post up, they look at you like you're an alien. The thing is that a lot of these kids coming up are being discouraged from taking those mid-range shots. And what they see in the NBA product, because what do people love? They love the NBA. That's why a lot of these kids fall in love with basketball. They see guys in the NBA passing up these mid-range shots and not having that skill set and not working back in the basket. So do you think, you and I, when we were growing up, what did we do? We would go outside and we would play basketball, and we'd be trying to do fadeaways and like these back-to-basket moves, and we'd be doing, we'd be pretending we were Hakeem in the post, and we'd mix it up and all of that stuff. But these kids are going outside trying to emulate these hardened step backs, these Doncic step backs, and they're not working on those aspects of the game. Then they get into the AAU, high school level, etc., and their coaches are telling them the same thing.
They'll do the same thing. Yeah, it's enforcement of that style of play that makes it appear the standard, to be the standard. And that's a shame. And I just want to talk about what it was like going out, you know, as young men who love the sport of basketball, who witnessed these players with a variety of skill, and what made the game so enriching for us. Yes, I remember not only just working on my three-point shot, I worked on my bank shot because of Tim Duncan. You know, like you said, worked on trying to get the fadeaway done because of Kobe Bryant, Hakeem Olajuwon, Michael Jordan, you know, working on our crossover, you know, because of Allen Iverson, and the killer crossover because of Tim Hardaway, how explosive.
And a lot of those same reasons for Kobe. Same thing, watching Kobe. Really.
When you have those variety of players who had these awesome, you know, aspects of skill that you can emulate, it made the game fulfilling. Because I remember I was a deadly three-point, you know, threat, but my brother was even more so deadly. But you know what? Because players anticipated him shooting the three, he developed a dribble hezzy, where it looked like he was going to shoot, concede his dribble, and then he would go into the mid-range and shoot that effectively as well. That's the thing. You want to use the whole aspect of the court to your advantage, not just that far-range shot. And those who grow up with that idea, like, you know, the Doncic, unfortunately, you can see them blossoming in today's game. You know,
yeah,
it's just sad that
I think what happens a lot though too, and what you see in the NBA game now that's so frustrating, is that people just continue to pass up those shots. Players continue to pass up those shots. They get into those seams and they're passing them up. Or you'll have a guy like Joel Embiid who has his back to the basket, and he has somebody like James Harden or smaller on him, and he has no idea how to get the shot up over him. He has no idea how to be efficient from that spot. And not only that, the moves that he does conduct look like they're in slow motion. He's not moving fast because he's not comfortable. That's the thing.
It looks uncoordinated. And it doesn't even look intentional at times. It just looks really sloppy.
Exactly.
You know, it doesn't look refined. You know, it doesn't look like someone who has mastered his own body in this particular circumstance, you know. And I just want to make reference to the Dream Team, the first Dream Team. You know, when they ran scrimmages, they were like full-blown games. They didn't just run scrimmages. They were going at one another because they wanted to prove a point.
Pride is sorely missing in the game now, because, you know, a lot of these guys, I've talked about this before. You have guys like Ian Mahinmi, you know, making $18 million a year, rotting away on the bench, playing like 10 minutes a game. You have guys like Evan Turner that are signing, and, you know, I liked Evan Turner as a player, but signing $70 to $80 million contracts. You know, and back in like 92, 93, Michael Jordan was making at the time $2 million a year.
Right.
$2 or $3 million a year. So there's a big difference, and there was more pride and more at stake back then when you played. But some of these guys that come into the league, they secure the bag so early.
There's no incentive. Yeah, there's no incentive to progress and grow. You know, once you receive the deal that you're seeking, you kind of sit back, relax, and go into cruise control. You know, and it takes a special type of individual to be an NBA player alone, because you put your body on the line every night. But once you've reached that mark in, you know, compensation, you see it all the time. Players fail to progress in the way in which they should, you know, and that's the thing. You're so right. The pride, the incentive to improve, the motivation to do, and not just to play at the level at which you are, but to go beyond yourself. It's just not
That's what
quite.
made guys like Kobe that great, because, you know, they talk about him with it when he was in high school, showing up to the gym at like 5 a.m. and like getting into the gym and shooting shots a few hours before school started. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Let me just say this about Kobe. Kobe was not a natural, contrary to popular belief. Yeah, he was an amazing talent, but he worked exceedingly hard to develop himself into a phenomenal player. That is the truth. Right. And that's another profound argument when you could compare other players who have natural abilities, gifts, and talents. This guy Kobe had some of that, but man, he had to work throughout his whole career to improve himself, and he never stopped doing that. That's the thing that is more powerful than talent and gifts, is the mindset. It's the mindset.
It plays a big role, and we're going to get into that actually. That's actually the next thing. So distraction by technology is another reason, and I just want to bring up a couple some alarming statistics here. So this is as of, I want to say 2018. So the average smartphone user touches their phone 2,617 times per day. 41% of teens feel overwhelmed by the number of notifications they receive daily. 63% of parents feel teens are addicted to their devices, and 85% of smartphone users will check their devices while speaking with friends and family. If you don't think that kids are distracted today, and if you don't think that that's impacting their focus on their workouts, on playing the game of basketball, on their mindset, on their focus when they're on the basketball court, you are insane. This is easily the most distracted generation of people. And the biggest problem is that they're so distracted that it impacts basically everything that they do. That's why it's the hot take generation, right? 280 characters or less for Twitter. It's literally, let's make it so we can cater to those short attention spans that are out there. But I wanted to get your take on that.
Oh, that's a different podcast. That subject alone is a podcast that can be spoken of for hours, because you're touching upon a very significant part of our society that is actually hurting it right now. As a result of us just consuming little tidbits of information, we're not getting the whole story. We're not, and because of that, we're also in a position to where we cannot think critically, and also our brains are being rewired, and it's being changed for us not to be able to concentrate, you know, which is required in the process for us to reach a point of enlightenment, not just with those around us, but even within ourselves. You know, we have to have mastery of concentration. I'm sorry about that alarm going in the background. Oh, no. But, you know, and that's the thing. When we put ourselves in this constant form of stimulation, that alone reduces the ability to develop discipline and structure. And you see that going on in the game right now, because discipline and structure requires intense concentration, delayed gratification. You cannot receive things instantly, which is the most profound way to experience the full potential of growth. Is delaying, the importance of delaying your gratification to understand that you're working towards something. But because now we're able to receive tidbits of information like this, if we don't receive that gratification right away, we feel it's ineffective and we feel that it's not working. And as a result of that, we do not have the opportunity to experience our greater selves. And that's the true tragedy. And I say that because that is exactly what's going on with the game of basketball. If you don't learn how to fundamentally develop your gifts and talents so you can receive the full potential of who you are meant to be, then you'll be subpar in the demonstration of your game. And there it is. It shows in Joel Embiid. It shows in Anthony Davis not knowing what to do when Jimmy Butler is defending him. It shows in players not taking advantage skillfully of mismatches that occur out there on the court. When we look in the past of players who delayed that gratification, knowing exactly what to do with surgical precision when they see a mismatch. Oh, you're gonna guard me? This is exactly what I'm going to do. You know what I mean?
I mean, the ability to think in the moment. Exactly,
Yeah.
to be able to think and act in the moment. And I wanted to bring up another point too, and I love what you said. I agree with everything. I want to give people the definition of social engineering. It's the use of centralized planning, an attempt to manage social change and regulate the future development and behavior of a society. That plays a factor in here. What it is basically everybody's been engineered and programmed to always have a cell phone on it, right? To always constantly have that by their side and constantly be looking at it. They are mesmerized by the notifications they receive. They get gratification out of it. And at the same time, what ends up happening is they are also bombarded constantly with ads. They're bombarded with distractions. They're bombarded constantly, even more than ever before, with ways to engineer them. ESPN, Bleacher Report, the most popular ads, all of that stuff. So social engineering absolutely plays a factor in all of this. It's part of why people are so distracted. And somebody on Twitter gets kind of raised a hairy eyebrow or whatever at me for mentioning social engineering in this. I was like, I don't think you understand how social engineering impacts everybody's behavior.
It does. And look, even though I'm aware of it, it still impacts mine. And, this is the true definition of artificial intelligence. Because before these platforms existed, before we had all these distractions at, literally the tip of our fingertips, we developed our own level of consciousness. The most profound thinkers would have the capacity to sit in silence for hours, days on end, contemplating upon themselves. And from that, we find the greatest level of creation. And that is being taken away from us right now. And, we're talking about basketball, but to keep it along the same lines of basketball, the great players.
But there is a bigger picture. It's okay. Yeah. Like that's the thing. There is a much bigger picture to this.
Yeah. The great players that we've witnessed in our time, like the Michael Jordans, the Hakeem Olajuwons, the Kobe Bryant, demonstrated that magnitude of concentration to the point to where Matt Barnes was able to throw a basketball within inches of Kobe Bryant's face, and he doesn't even.
He didn't even react.
To the point to where Chris Rock was talking his ear off, out on the bench during the playoff game, and Kobe Bryant was just fixed in a daze, not even responding to him, because of that ability to concentrate and go deep within themselves to find truth. And that is what is being stripped away. We're not able to go deep within ourselves because everything that we are experiencing now is external. And the things that matter the most are items that are internal. So yeah, we are intelligent, but it's artificial intelligence.
And it can cause depression too, because it's the height of social media, height of access and whatnot, and you're constantly comparing yourself to other people's artificial lives, what they're posting on social media and whatnot. And it does cause a level of insecurity and whatnot. And I wanted to bring up a quote from JJ Redick as well. JJ Redick, and then he tried to kind of take it back because they were probably like, hey, don't say that. But his quote was, he said, "I really believe this. There are more guys concerned with getting a pregame fit on Instagram than they are worrying about the win and loss of a basketball game."
Wow.
Says a lot.
That's I sigh because that's the truth. that's the thing. You're getting these flashes, you're getting these moments, and they're being defined as the fullness of interpretation, the fullness upon what is really going on when it's not. And that's the true definitive problem. Because whatever you're doing that is wholesome, that is really adding value to yourself, cannot be filmed and posted on social media because it's too long.
Right.
It's a movie.
And also, I think what's happened too is, it's a movie. And, the other thing too is it's made people keep a lot of their pain and emotion and whatnot internal, because they don't want people to see that on social media. So what they're doing is they're making their life look grand.
Yes, exactly. But under the veil of what is being posted artificially, let's say that, because that's exactly what it is. Under the veil of what is being posted artificially, we fail to see reality. Wow. Very deep.
Deep, yeah. I mean, we could go. I might even do another episode on this, to be honest.
Yeah, like I said, it's a podcast within itself.
Yeah. Well, so a couple other quick points. Kyrie Irving in 2018 stated, he was with the Celtics at the time. He said, "There's no defense being played in today's NBA." He said, "I think it's just not a lot of defense being played," said Kyrie Irving. "Teams are scoring like it's the 1960s or 70s. It's 132 to 112, 142 to 121. There's no defense. You go into a Utah-Boston game and it's 86-92. You see the difference in the effort every single night. I get it from an NBA player standpoint, the amount of games that we play, but sometimes you have to make guys miss. We are all NBA players. If you see an open look at the rim, I'm pretty sure we're going to knock it down over 50% of the time if it's wide open. There's no defense and just no effort. It's really what it comes down to. Nobody should be scoring that many points." And I want to bring this up really quick. Is you look at a guy who's glorified by the league. You look at guys like Kyrie Irving, who I don't think is a strong defender, Trae Young, Luka Doncic and stuff. The league glorifies these players. And that's why sometimes I call this the WWE NBA, is because, it's all about, just promoting these top names and not going into any context whatsoever about the shape of the league today, right? The era that they're playing in, how they're able to get away with the way that they play and be called a star and whatnot. But it's pretty telling that Kyrie Irving would say there's no defense today.
Yeah, I find that to be interesting, because he's considered to be a high volume scorer, and like you said, he's not a great defender. But to be honest, that statement was more so of a confession versus anything. And
he's saying that about the league he's in. He's saying that about what defense, this is one of the top scorers in the league when he's healthy. This is him basically telling on himself.
Yeah, he's literally saying, look, I'm not as great as I appear to be. I mean, this is a bona fide confession. It further solidifies the argument that these players in the past, and I know we have those who don't agree, it's okay, but those players in the past would dominate in today's league. I mean, period. Because first of all, of the psychological aspect, their mindset and their will, their drive in standard to perform every single night. And you're doing it against people who don't have effort or are not even allowed to engage with them on a physical level defensively. One player who's a true representation of this, when you consider it growing up in eras of defensive interpretation, was Kobe Bryant. When you see his initial numbers coming into the league, you see every year that his averages went up because there were defensive changes in the game. Not devaluing Kobe Bryant as a player, but you can see as the era changed, he was able to put up crazy numbers as a result of the defensive changes.
Right, in 05, 06, exactly, and whatnot, in 06, 07, too, when hand checking was officially removed in 04, 05.
Yes.
Right, after the Pistons won the 2004 NBA championship. The rules definitely play a factor into the game regressing as well from a visual standpoint and a competitive standpoint, because you can't put your hands on anybody anymore, and the defense is so handicapped. So it's why you get guys like LeBron, considered, all-world, all-star, who doesn't shoot 38% for his career season or playoffs outside of 3 feet. He can get away with barreling down the lane constantly and getting in shooting like 70% under the basket, and that's because nobody can touch him, and that absolutely plays a factor.
I mean, let's just do this just for fun. Let's put LeBron James as Michael Jordan going up against the Detroit Pistons of the 80s. Let's see how long he would be able to withstand that type
And
of
see,
beat.
Jordan was able to not only be tough enough to take the beating, but he was tough and he had the skill to get his shot off and beat them in other ways. He had the skill to hit them in the mid-range, to come off screens and hit shots, to be fading away from the hoop, to contort his body. He had the flexibility, the core strength, the balance, all of that stuff he had. That's the thing.
And to be honest, it would have made LeBron James even a better player because it would force him to develop, guess what? Other skills. It would force him to adapt and say, okay, this is not working out. I got to try this. I have to try that, but not having that intensity on the defensive end, once again, handicaps development and it handicaps the state of the game to where it can be, where it used to be.
Yeah.
So I am all, and we've been talking about this for a long time. I would love to see the NBA bring back some more physicality into the game. And I'm with Hubie Brown 110%. And those who advocate for this, let's just bring back hand checking. Let's bring it back.
Mike Fratello, Doug Collins, and Hubie Brown speak too much truth. That's why they're not on TV anymore. That's why you don't listen to them, because they speak too much truth. So I'm going to bring up a couple other points.
Yeah.
Real quick. So I brought this up in a thread. I said athletes prior to 2000 were perfectly equipped for amazing results. They had gyms, gym equipment, weights, boxes, cable machines, medicine balls, resistant bands, jump rope, etc. They had supplements, proteins, vitamins, amino acids, etc. They had food. They knew what to eat. They knew what fluids to take in. They had the proper guidance. They had the genetics as well, the determination, the motivation, the drive. They had everything that they could possibly need in order to achieve the highest levels of physical performance. Look at guys like Doug Christie and Kendall Gill. Yeah. Guys that look like they had like 0 to 1% body fat. They were able to control that based on, what they eat, their diet, their workouts, all of that stuff. In fact, after Kendall Gill retired, he ended up being like a boxer, I believe, at the pro level. But look at guys like George McGinnis in the 70s, and guys like Wilt Chamberlain prior, in the shape that these guys were in. Even guys like for the Blazers like T.R. Dunn and whatnot. These guys had everything they possibly could need to excel at the highest level. And what happens when somebody calls a workout an old school workout? What does that normally involve? Hard work.
Absolutely.
If somebody says old school workout, what it is you're going to work your butt off and you're going to sweat and you're going to get, this is going to be tough. We are babying these kids and we're babying these athletes.
Once again, because we are looking for instant gratification. We're looking for instantaneous results. And then you forget how to build. These individuals went through these so-called old school workouts because it took time for those muscles to develop properly. Listen to the word that I said here, properly. So as a result of you developing those muscles properly, you are more prepared to handle intense competition physically, because it's not something that you just picked up on a whim. You've been doing these workouts since your teenage years, and you've maintained that standard throughout the course of your life. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not saying that medical science have not improved in aiding in having players perform to the best of their capacity. I'm not saying that. We're just saying that these methods, in principle, are still very effective, and you cannot dismiss them just because they appear to be, let's say, archaic in nature. It's not true. It's not true.
But the thing is, and I also want to point out too, is, players still had a basketball in a court and the ability to cut, slide, jump, run. They had that ability, the ball the same size, same weight, hoop the same height, court the same dimensions. etc. That was still in play. There was less distraction by technology, less being overwhelmed with information, less BS thrown at them in the form of questionable training, workouts. There was more consistency, and there were more players with a separate strength and conditioning coach, I believe, at the youth levels. Somebody that just worked on making you a better overall, all-around athlete. As opposed to having the coach or whoever, assistant coach or whatever, to be a catch-all of somebody that says, okay, we're going to handle, quote unquote strength conditioning, because they don't do that as much anymore now, because they're trying to go against that. By the way, strength matters in basketball, even in this NBA. But you look at the Tim Grover example, right? Tim Grover was not teaching Michael Jordan basketball. What Tim Grover was doing was making Michael Jordan the best athlete he possibly could be.
Exactly.
Right? We need more kids working with Tim Grover types on strength and conditioning and giving them consistency, as opposed to having some coach be like a catch-all and say, hey, we're going to run you into the ground playing basketball, and we're going to do these, inconsistent strength and conditioning workouts that I'm not an expert on, but it's part of the system. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes, I agree 110%. And that's going back once again into the aspects of development that are vital in understanding the how important it is to compartmentalize aspects of yourself, to understand that you have a body to maintain, and also the body that is needed to play out there in the court. And I will say that training, when done right, can lead to phenomenal results. LeBron James has made significant investments in his training. And, it does show, in all fairness. But what I would like to mention, and this is something that you stand on, is that these players are just as athletic, if not even more so in the past, in comparison to these players of today. It's just
honestly, we had tougher super athletes in the past. There were people, there's no Dominique Wilkins today.
Come on.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I wanted to bring up, too, when we're talking about conditioning and whatnot, and how supposedly this is the most elite era of athlete. Marc J. Spears came out after Game 7 of the Clippers series. He said several Clippers were so fatigued during Game 7 against Denver that they struggled to play stints longer than 3 minutes and asked out of the game for a breather in the fourth quarter. This is unbelievable. So we're in a Game 7 in the NBA playoffs. These guys didn't have to travel. There's no back-to-backs. They're playing in a league with minimal physicality as well. And you're telling me that in the fourth quarter of an NBA playoffs Game 7, these guys are asking to be taken out with any stint longer than 3 minutes? What does that tell you? Also, last season, during the season, at one point, 22% of the league was injured, and a lot of those were non-contact injuries. It's the most injuries, I believe, that they've had at one point in the NBA and in NBA history. So why am I being told that these are the most elite, toughest athletes we've ever had in the NBA, when everything else that I'm seeing and all the stories I hear coming out point to the opposite?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the argument speaks for itself, Dee. Sometimes with increased technology, you develop weaknesses in the natural humanity of ourselves. And I chose humanity there intentionally. But, you forget what it means to be a natural human being. And a lot of these athletes in the past developed themselves naturally. And it led to a greater qualitative experience with their performance that was able to last for a prolonged period of time. Look at the Chief, man. You're talking about someone who maintained a relatively outstanding standard in consistency and performance while being in the league for 20 years. It's hard to imagine seeing that now in today's game. I mean, I
look at the way he was running the floor really well, even with Chicago. Robert Parrish was still running the floor as well, and he was great at running the floor his whole career.
And this was during the most, physical time for a big man back then, taking all kind of punches and elbows where it was okay for you to grab a rebound and swing your elbows wildly to clear space before making that outlet pass. He endured all of that, So the human body has the great capacity to endure a lot, but when you don't have the natural means of training, like you mentioned, that just focuses on spot training, to get a very fast result, you see the body break down and things like that. And that's a really good observation there.
Yeah, 100%. So last piece that I wanted to discuss, and just to let our listeners know, this section ran a little bit long. So we're going to do a two-parter, and we're going to try to come back next week with the rest. So next week, we're going to compare Hakeem and Tim Duncan, who we would take, and we'll get into, worst Twitter takes and mailbag. I kind of want to release this episode as its own because I think it's been a great discussion. So we'll come back next week on that. So the last point that I wanted to bring up is at the height of access, height of social media, I don't think players, the youth love the game the same way as they used to. I don't think they research it the same way as they used to. You have instances with like Knicks rookie Mitchell Robinson not, being in the NBA playing for the New York Knicks and stating that he had never heard of Hakeem Olajuwon before.
Oh,
so
wow.
How can you be supposedly love the game of basketball and, living the game of basketball coming up? How is that possible for you to get to the NBA and not know who Hakeem Olajuwon is? And another case of this too is one of the players that Penny Hardaway recruited to Memphis. He's the head coach of college basketball, Memphis college basketball, excuse me. One of the people that he recruited, I believe a 5-star recruit, stated that he had never seen a Penny Hardaway highlight before.
Wow. Whoa.
How is it possible that these kids are coming up, loving basketball, supposedly living it at the height of information, the height of access, and they don't know these things?
Well, once again, because of what is being presented, we're losing our ability to do research. And when we grew up, fortunately, we lived during the time to see these players and their various skill sets, be demonstrated before us in live action. But even at that, we still knew who Will Chamberlain was. We still knew who Bill Russell was. We still knew who Sleepy Floyd was, because these players of today spoke about them. With me being a Laker fan, I was able to know about Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, all the past Laker greats that existed before the Showtime era, because the players of today continuously paid homage to them. And they respected not just the team that they played for and had that sense of pride that you mentioned, they also acknowledged those who came before them. And we don't have that level of reverence, unfortunately, today, because we live in a society that feels entitled and emboldened to just go out there and do you. And as a result of that, you forget and you don't even pay attention to the items that existed before that allowed you to have the privileges that you're experiencing now. That's why I am not entitled to anything. For everything, I am grateful. You got to be careful upon entitlement, because literally we don't deserve anything. Everything that we have now is because somebody before us invested greatly for us to experience the treasures that we have now. So we see the game once again digressing, and it supports our argument because there isn't that reverence, that homage there to pay that level of respect. And you develop yourself beyond, because you're unaware of the greatness that existed before you.
What's funny is you do these segues and you don't even know where I'm going with it. This is perfect. So I wanted to get into the last part of the podcast, a Kevin Garnett quote, how he feels about AAU and how it's ruined the NBA. He said it's created by entitled kids. So it's created entitled kids, excuse me. He says, our league now is at a point where you have to teach more than anything, said Garnett, who played on a standout Michigan AAU team with the late Robert Tractor Trailer and Albert White. AAU has killed our league. Seriously, I hate to even say this, but it's real. From the perspective that these kids are not being taught anything, which also echoes Kobe's comments as well. He says they have intentions and they want things, but the way they see it is not how our league works. You earn everything in this league. You're not entitled to anything, and it's more entitlement than anything. And then the article goes on, and this is an article actually by J.R. Gamble, and he states, the passion for the game, which was once driven by a street ball culture, has been replaced by emotionless machines, attending prep schools and playing multiple games a day, unconcerned with the outcome, just furthering personal goals. And that goes back to your point about team as well. The end game has taken priority and the process is being ignored. Talk to basketball coaches and trainers in New York, and they'll tell you that AAU has slowly killed basketball in the city. Just look at how the talent level has diminished in what was once the mecca of hoops. You can find a ton of knowledgeable basketball minds that despise AAU, but accept that it is a necessary evil in today's sports landscape. And it goes on, the last portion, I think this is important. Under the Table deals with coaches and agents, the exploitation of kids of color, and the ruthlessness of using whatever tactic is necessary to recruit players to a team, school, or tournament is rampant in today's current AAU culture. This madness ties directly into NCAA recruiting wars and has led to widespread corruption, which often begins at the AAU level, with middlemen who could be anything from a high school coach looking for better opportunities, a dad or mom looking for financial leverage, or an assistant coach at the college level looking for an edge in recruiting. The complaints are endless. Even the originators and pioneers of AAU ball and its youth takeover, like Sonny Vaccaro, acknowledge it. And he said, it's a soulless, mindless operation. None of these people will stand up and call it what it is.
Wow. There it is. It just solidified.
Scary, right?
And I was unaware that you were going to read that. You know, it's that's really a tragedy. And I grew up during the era where high school kids, you know, were looking to be that next phenom that's going to get drafted out of, you know, high school into this league, and it forced them to put, you know, much more sustainable goals aside. You know, get this, you know, this, let's say, this golden hill, which only can be applied to 1% to 2% of the population. And then, you know, that's the thing. When you lose value over things that are meaningful, you know, unfortunately, you lose yourself. And we see that in the game of basketball because of the priorities that has taken its place. Instead of just, you know, participating in the area where character is developed versus just focusing on the entitlement of your talents and your gifts. And one thing that I love is bringing up the street culture, because street basketball is the true developer of basketball composure and accentuating the gift, in my opinion, because I grew up in that culture, and we played at various parks where every park had like this boss player. Like, that kid is one of the greatest kids out there. And it was our opportunity as a team to take down the top player on that court and earn that court. And we would go all over the city doing that in friendly, true, passionate competition. And AAU took that away because of paying attention to individual talent, and, you know, people going there not to see the team perform, but to see this individual talent perform. Yeah. And as a result of that, you develop a poor product. And
it's partly why we lost that toughness along the way. And I want to bring this up to people. You are seeing peak AAU NBA right now, because this has been a staple to the system. It has been the system that's been churning out players for well over a decade. Now you're looking at, you know, a couple decades of this. So what you're seeing right now is the fruition of it. And I think that's part of the reason why basketball is what it is today. It's part of it, not all of it, like we discussed here. So that's going to be it for episode 7. Like I said, we're going to push the other topics to next week, and I hope to have you on again because I think it would be fun. Any last thoughts on the state of basketball today?
Well, I do find hope in what appears to be the spirit. The game of basketball is still a beautiful game. It's still a game that I love, and what I see in the future is changes occurring to where those aspects of development will matter. And I also see changes in the structure of the game, making things much more competitive, making changes, you know, defensively and offensively as well, to make the game much more skill oriented, to bring back more intelligence into the game. not to just emphasize upon individualistic talent, but to emphasize upon team playing. I also see reformations in our collegiate system, because right now I see young players potentially having the option to go into the professional element of the game much earlier and taking options to participate in not just amateur athleticism, but to participate in team-oriented competition like we see overseas, possibly making its way into our system out here in America and being reputable into developing elite performers who can actually justify being an NBA player. So kind of like what we see with baseball, with their system of AA and AAA baseball before they get into the major leagues. I could see that format taking its place in basketball because I think it's imperative.
I love it. Yeah, I completely agree, and fingers crossed. So is there anything you want to plug? I know that you're on Twitter, SwaggyPLino on Twitter. Definitely give him a follow. Is there anything else you're working on?
Oh, you know what? I just want to thank you for allowing me to be on this podcast. It's been refreshing. You are an outstanding podcaster. You're just a natural born talent, but you're also fundamental with your thoughts and ideas. And I just want to wish you the best. As for myself on Twitter, you may follow me, but notice that I'm relatively silent. That's because I am cleansing my mind, as what we mentioned, from this aspect of artificial intelligence to find out more about myself and the reality that I am in. And I'm looking for items of gratefulness, escaping from the mindset of so-called entitlement, which has never been a part of me, and just seeing the beauty of life in every day that I have the opportunity to wake up and see the sunrise. And I'm just grateful for that beyond measure. And for that, I thank you for having me on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Use the word grateful. I'm grateful for having you on. And, thank you, that you'd be willing to come on to the show. So hopefully we can do it again next week for episode 8. For everybody else, I'm on Twitter at Dee4Three84. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcast, on Stitcher, on CLNS Media, on Podcast Addict, etc. Soon I'm going to try to be getting on Spotify as well. Definitely check out the Format podcast with Bruce Hope. He had me on as a guest. Definitely tune into that. We talked about a lot of the same topics Swag and I just talked about today. And so, yeah, thank you again for tuning in. Definitely let me know what you think of the show, and tune in for episode 8 next week.